Hello everyone, Melody here, mama of 4 in our blended family of 6. Welcome to Homeschool Happy Hour. Today we're going to talk about how do we as homeschoolers deal with resistant learners. Before I go any further, please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, follow along on Instagram at Homeschool Happy Hour, and please make sure to drop a comment in the box below as this video is going with your feedback and thoughts about what your experiences have been with having a child that may be resistant to learning and resistant to your homeschool. If you hear that was a car driving by, I am in the parking lot at our local public school as our 2 exchange students attend volleyball practice. I live far enough out of town that when I have to come into town, my husband's traveling, so we can't split who is picking up the kids. So I apologize for the car noise that is inevitably going to happen in the background. I've been sitting here with nothing happening for some time now, but of course, now that I've started a video, everybody needs to drive by. I did a video not that long ago talking about if you believe or if people are telling you that your child is behind, and talking about, how to deal with this concept of our children falling behind. If you're interested in that video, please check it out. It's in my playlist. How could this many people possibly need to be somewhere in this exact moment? You do know that if I turn my video off, no more cars will come. Almost guaranteed. And if it wasn't so bloody hot, I'd roll up my window so that you couldn't hear them all. This is bordering on ridiculous. Maybe we're done now. The reason why I mentioned that video is because often when we have a resistant learner, it can go hand in hand with concerns about whether our children are falling behind or not. And so I won't be talking about that specifically today, but as far as having a child that's a resistant learner, there's a few trains of thought in this area. A very popular opinion that I'm hearing a lot recently is there's no such thing as a child that doesn't want to learn. That if we do our job as homeschoolers and make learning joyful, then children will learn and they'll never resist. And if your child is resisting learning, it doesn't have anything to do with them. It has everything to do with the environment, and you're just not, how do I put this into words? If your child is resisting learning, then your approach is wrong. That's what I'm hearing. I'm not saying that, but that seems to be a popular opinion in this moment in society. And I just would like to respond to that real quickly before I move on. And I would just like to say, I don't like doing the dishes. I don't like paying bills. There are certain errands I'm not a big fan of. Laundry never seems to stop. We do have some kids in public school. I don't like having to deal with the public school politics. There are things in life that I don't like doing. I am resistant to those things, but I do them because I need to do them, because life is not always about being happy in every single moment and only doing the things that bring us joy. It's just not. It's not. It never will be. I feel like this idealistic view that we should always be happy in everything that we do, it's ridiculous. And honestly, when our children are receiving their education and they're going through their education, it's really no different. There are going to be things that they don't like. That is okay. And if you don't like something, even as adults, we don't want to do them. We're not interested in them. That is normal and that is acceptable, but we still have to teach our children that we got to do things we don't like sometimes. You might have a child that is resistant to math. That's a popular one. I have a child that's super resistant to math. She doesn't like math. Now, that could be because it's just not her subject of choice. I mean, kids aren't necessarily going to like every single subject that you could learn. That doesn't mean we don't teach them math. I mean, You still have to do it, even if you don't like it. Now, you can absolutely get creative, and I will have another video coming up soon specifically about math and how to deal with children that are resistant to that subject, because that's a popular one. But I just use it as a short example right now. It could be reading, it could be writing, it could be science, history, it could be anything that we're asking them to learn and they're resistant to it. The first thing, they just might not like it, and that is okay. And if your child doesn't like something and your response to that is, well, they didn't like it, so they were resistant to it, so we just aren't going to do it, that's not particularly realistic. It's not likely to give them a well-rounded education. I do believe that if we focus on the things that our kids love, if we focus on the joys of learning, they will gain more from that. They're going to absorb more about the things that they like doing, absolutely. But there's still some things that we have to touch on, whether they like it or not. Now, of course, we want to try and present that to them in a way that can get them as interested as possible. It's not, well, just push through and keep it unpleasant and fight against it. If you're actively fighting against it with your kids, then it might be time to reevaluate and maybe take a different approach, but it doesn't mean it's time to drop that subject altogether. Another cause to having a child that is resistant to learning might be they might not be ready for what you're teaching in that moment. It might be too challenging for them. There might be some prerequisites and building blocks that need to be further developed before you're doing that. If a child finds something is easy to comprehend, they might not like it, so they might resist it a little bit, but they're not going to resist it as much if it's something that they can absorb fairly easily. So it's okay to back off, take smaller steps, maybe work on some materials that are building blocks towards where you want to be, rather than say, well, you need to learn Algebra 1 right in this moment, and so we're just going to focus on Algebra 1 until you absorb it. That's not likely to get you the results that you're after either. We've got kids that are resistant to learning because they don't like the material. We've got kids that are resistant to learning because the material may be too challenging for them. And then you might just have a child that is resistant to learning because they have just a general learning challenge or neurodivergence, and the way in which you're teaching it is not working for their brain. It's really important to know where your kids are at, what they're capable of in this moment, and to set goals based on them as individuals. If you can work with your child where they're at and build from there, you're going to have a lot more success. Another reason that your child might be resistant to learning might have to do with things outside of the learning itself. If your child has something going on that is stressing them out outside of learning, that absolutely can impact your learning. So maybe it's not the subject, maybe it's not they don't like the subject might not be too hard, but their mind is in a different place. We need to remember that socially, emotionally, our kids need to have those things taken care of, their emotions and how they're feeling, before we can expect them to learn effectively. If a kid is stressed or upset, maybe you had a pet that passed away, or even worse, a family member that has passed away, there's a divorce, maybe it was the summer and they've spent all summer kind of just doing what they want to do, playing video games or whatever, and now you're jumping right into a really highly structured homeschool bit, and they're upset or feeling a loss because they're not able to spend their time doing what they want to do all day. To us as adults, it's easy to say, okay, well, kid, get over it. You got to do what you got to do. But especially when you have very young children, or if you have a neurodivergent child that struggles with that change, we need to take the time to acknowledge that and ease them into what we're doing. And if we can't acknowledge where they're at emotionally, we're not going to be able to help them move forward cognitively. The last thing I would like to note here is that it is absolutely normal to encounter resistance along your homeschool journey. No matter how perfectly you do things, no matter how much you're child-directed or structured, it doesn't matter. You're going to encounter resistance at some point. That is normal. It is not a sign that you're doing anything wrong. It might be a sign that you need to kind of pause and evaluate what's going on so you can decide where that resistance is coming from. Maybe it's coming from multiple things. You are the expert on your child. You know what's going on with them more than anybody else. And having those open lines of communication with your kid and being aware of where they're at and what they're working with and what works best for them, that is going to help you the most. So if you see these posts on Instagram or Facebook or videos on YouTube or whatever where it's talking about if your child is resisting learning, then you're doing something wrong, I just can't even with that. Just ignore it, let it go. If you are constantly feel like you're just up against a brick wall, you probably have to look and see what's going on and really evaluate what's happening in order to be able to get past that, for sure. But if you're coming across resistance every now and then and you're evaluating it and you're looking at it, and maybe it's just a case where your kid is testing you and they're like, oh, well, if I push this, mom's not going to make me do this that I don't want to do. And maybe that's something that you have to push back and you say, we got to do this no matter what. Maybe there's flexibility in that. I don't know. You have to decide in your home for your child what that looks like. And don't let anybody tell you that you're doing something wrong or that there's one right way to do it, because that's just foolishness. Be confident in your homeschool. Be confident in your knowledge of your family and your child, and do what you see as the best choice at that time. That will change. That is okay. Resistance is not a sign of failure. It is not a sign of anything wrong with your homeschool. It's just a symptom that maybe we need to evaluate. So I think at this point I've repeated myself multiple times, so hopefully you got the message. If you have your own tips, tricks, or advice on how to deal with resistant learners, please drop a comment in the box below. I think the one thing that I didn't really focus on here is like make learning fun, but that's because we all know that. We all know that if we make learning more fun, the kids are more engaged. And I will talk more about that specific to math in that other video I was talking about. But until then, thank you for joining me, and I will catch you next time. I genuinely want to know what is going on that has everybody going back and forth right here, because this is not like a main road. This is like a dirt road that goes to nowhere. So what are these people doing on this dirt road that goes to nowhere? I mean, I guess it goes to somewhere.